Radio Wammo Breakfast. Time now for the New Scientist feature with Janine Young joining us in Melbourne City today. Janine, good morning to you.
Good morning.
Today, two stories out of Russia, really. There's Russian stories. The first up, the discovery of a deep underground buried lake in Antarctica by a Russian team.
People have known about Lake Vostok for quite a long time. It's about 3.5 kilometres down underneath the surface of the Antarctic ice sheet. It's around about 14 kilometres, it's more than a kilometre deep itself. It's been buried for more than 14 million years. So it's been down there for a very, very long time. And it turns out that it's potentially been breached. There's a team that's been trying to work out what's down there. Yeah. Is there life in Lake Vostok? As you say, this Russian team has been drilling for quite some time through the summer, and it has to be the summer because obviously the winter's not going to work. And they believe that they've actually penetrated the surface of the lake late last week. Now, what they've done is, as soon as they thought that happened, they pulled the bore back up the borehole, and they're expecting it to be able to freeze over again across the winter. They don't want it contaminated. Obviously, that's going to mess things up if you're sampling winds up contaminating the very thing that you're trying to work out if it actually has life.
Yeah.
But being able to get down that far is a really big achievement, and everyone's a bit excited because to find out what's down there it's a bit exciting, frankly. It's been isolated for so long. There's a lot of debate as to whether or not there'll be anything down there. There's a lot of ice bubbles trapped in the ice sheet above it, and so some people are saying that that's likely to be toxic, and in fact there may be nothing down there at all, which would in fact be more interesting because it would be the only body of water on the planet with no life in it.
Wow, perhaps
so it's all a bit exciting. We won't know for a year. The
freshest water on the planet, perhaps. But so it is in liquid form?
It is. They've hit water. They don't know whether or not it's the actual lake itself. They believe so. Now, how you find that out, to be honest, I'm not entirely sure. They've certainly sampled the accretion ice, which is the layer that forms just below the ice sheet itself. So they've actually worked out, there's stuff there. But as I said, there's a lot of oxygen trapped. So they think that may be toxic. So could you imagine having no life whatsoever? None.
Yeah.
It's quite extraordinary. So it's a bit exciting, and it'll be a year before we find out what's going on because, as I said, they've all packed up and gone home because it's starting to get a bit chilly now.
Well, that's right.
So,
from what I understand, also it's a bit of a race, kind of like the South Pole or North Pole races, where other teams, not only the Russians, but the other teams reckon next year they might try and get there before the Russians. And I don't know if there's a bit of bit of bias going on as well, but I did see a report saying that they reckon that the Russians' equipment is old and potentially dirty and could contaminate the lake, where we've got this flash equipment, and it's. But I think I've heard this sort of stuff before when you hear about people heading up Everest and doing that kind of stuff as well.
There's always a race to be the first.
Yeah, exactly. Hey, let's stay with Russia and their mission to the Mars moon Phobos, which didn't go quite so well.
No, it didn't. This mission was launched in November last year, and unfortunately a whole bunch of its launch machinery didn't work particularly well, so it didn't make it out of Earth's orbit. It crashed back to Earth in January, and of course there's been a little bit of recrimination, shall we say. People haven't been very happy about the fact that it didn't make it. What it was planning on doing was going to the Martian moon Phobos, and the probe was called Phobos Grunt, but I suspect that it's probably more like Grunt or something like that.
Yeah.
It's literally Phobos soil, Phobos ground.
Right.
Very much like the German word, I would think. So, yes, it didn't get off the ground, it crashed, and there were initial suggestions that it might have been sabotaged by the United States with a radar beam from the Marshall Islands, because I guess some rivalries never die.
Yeah.
What can you do? Then someone else said that it might have been a programming error. The final report is now out, and what they've found is that the machinery wasn't capable of withstanding the radiation in space. And the actual quote is, "Heavy ion bombardment corrupted program code in two components of the probe's computer, which resulted in the loss of the probe." Now, someone who actually had an experiment on the probe is saying, well, this could have been prevented if you had done your component testing properly. And apparently they didn't. It wasn't up to the job, and therefore they've lost the probe. So Russia's been having a bad year or two because they've managed to lose an uncrewed supply ship which was headed for the International Space Station. That went over Siberia and didn't go so well. They've lost 3 navigation satellites, an advanced military satellite, and a telecommunications satellite in the last year. That's not going so well.
It's funny because the American space program is relying on Russia so much, so I hope they're at least cooperating where they can to make sure some of these missions are at least a success. Also, with regards to that space radiation, wonder if that we're only just pondering here, but we were talking last week about the radiation from the sun. We're going through a extremely active solar period. I wonder if that had anything to do with it. They should probably investigate that as well, no doubt.
One would think that would probably be taken into account.
Yeah.
I don't know whether or not any of the solar maxima were tied in with that at the time, but space is a pretty unforgiving environment, and if, as I said, if you don't test your components properly, if you don't use stuff that's going to be able to stand up to that space radiation, there's a lot going on out there, then you're going to start losing your probes. And it's a pretty dicey business because you've had European space probes disappear, you've had Mars rovers that haven't made it to the surface because they haven't bounced properly. All you need is one little thing to go wrong, and it can be as simple as the very famous example of the metric units versus the imperial units.
Yeah, that was a famous one, wasn't it? Yeah.
Not matching up. It can be that simple.
Yeah. It's a miracle when it goes right. Janine, thanks so much for joining us from the pages in New Scientist magazine there, and you'll find those stories coming out in New Scientist magazine, newscientist.com as well. We'll see you next week.
See you next week.
20 minutes.